You know what's strangely exhausting? Being the person everyone describes as kind, thoughtful, easy to talk to, always there, always understanding, and somehow still ending the day feeling invisible, resentful, and deeply alone. On the surface, being nice seems simple. It sounds like one of the safest compliments a person can receive. Nice people are appreciated. Nice people are trusted. Nice people are the ones others feel comfortable around. But if you've ever felt trapped inside your own kindness, if you've ever said yes while your body wanted to say no, if you've ever smiled while something inside you quietly collapsed, then you already know there is a hidden psychology here. Because being too nice is rarely just about generosity. Very often, it is about survival, and that is where things become interesting. Most people think excessive niceness is a personality trait. They see it as a stable characteristic, almost like eye color or a naturally calm temperament. They assume some people are simply more agreeable, more patient, more emotionally mature, and sometimes that is true. Some people really are gentle by nature. Some people genuinely enjoy helping, connecting, smoothing conflict, and creating harmony in social life. But there is a difference between healthy kindness and compulsive niceness. Healthy kindness feels chosen. Compulsive niceness feels necessary. Healthy kindness comes from values. Compulsive niceness often comes from fear. That fear is not always obvious. In fact, one of the strange things about human behavior is that we often build habits long before we understand why they exist. A person may spend years being the peacemaker, the helper, the accommodating one, without realizing that this pattern is being driven by anxiety, low self worth, rejection sensitivity, or an old emotional rule learned very early in life. And this is why the psychology matters. Because once you understand what too nice behavior is actually doing beneath the surface, you stop seeing it as a moral strength alone and start seeing it as an adaptation. Sometimes an intelligent one, sometimes a painful one, often both. One of the clearest ways psychologists explain this is through attachment theory. John Bowlby and later Mary Ainsworth helped us understand that our earliest relationships teach us something profound about safety, closeness, and self worth. If love felt stable, your nervous system learned that connection did not require constant performance. But if love felt unpredictable, conditional, or emotionally expensive, a very different kind of learning could happen. A child does not sit down and think, I must become pleasing in order to avoid abandonment. The child simply notices patterns. When I am easy, people stay calm. When I need too much, people withdraw. When I upset someone, connection feels threatened. When I take care of others, I feel safer. When I disappear a little, everything goes more smoothly. Over time, these experiences become internal rules, not conscious beliefs at first, more like emotional reflexes, and later in adulthood, those reflexes can look like personality. You apologize too quickly. You over-explain. You soften your opinions before expressing them. You laugh when you are uncomfortable. You monitor everyone's mood in the room. You feel guilty for disappointing people. You confuse being needed with being loved. You feel responsible for emotions that are not yours. From the outside, these are often praised as social strengths. People may call you mature, emotionally intelligent, selfless, even rare. And to be fair, there may be real strengths there. Many people who are too nice are highly perceptive. They read facial expressions well. They notice tension early. They understand emotional subtext. Their social awareness can be unusually sharp. But there is a hidden cost. When your nervous system is trained to prioritize harmony over honesty, you begin abandoning yourself in very socially acceptable ways. That is one of the biggest secrets in this psychology. Self-abandonment does not always look dramatic. It often looks polite. And because it looks polite, everyone rewards it. This is why the pattern can become so hard to break. The world often reinforces the very behavior that exhausts you. People thank you for being flexible. They admire your patience. They rely on your calmness. They trust your availability. You become the stable one, the understanding one, the one who never makes things difficult. But inside, something else is happening. Resentment builds, fatigue builds, confusion builds, and eventually, a painful thought appears. Why do I feel so unseen when I've given so much? That question matters because it reveals a contradiction at the heart of compulsive niceness. Many people are trying to earn love through behaviors that actually hide their real self. They become easier to accept, but harder to truly know. This creates a quiet kind of loneliness. You may be surrounded by people who like you and still feel profoundly disconnected. Not because nobody cares, but because they are relating to a version of you built for safety rather than authenticity. And this brings us to another important psychological idea, the fawn response. Most people are familiar with fight or flight. Some know about freeze, but trauma researchers and clinicians often talk about a fourth pattern as well, fawn. The fawn response is when a person manages threat by becoming pleasing, compliant, helpful, agreeable, or indispensable. Instead of confronting danger or escaping it, the person attempts to neutralize it through attachment. If I can keep you happy, maybe you won't hurt me. If I can make myself useful, maybe you won't leave. If I can be easy to love, maybe I'll stay safe. This does not only happen in obviously traumatic environments, it can emerge in families where emotional expression was discouraged, where conflict felt unsafe, where a parent was unpredictable, fragile, angry, critical, or emotionally unavailable. It can also appear in environments where the child was heavily praised for being good, but not really allowed to be real. That distinction is crucial. Some people were not loved for who they were loved for how little trouble they caused, and that creates a very specific kind of adult psychology. These adults often struggle to identify their own needs because they learned early that needs could disrupt connection. They may be excellent at reading other people and strangely disconnected from themselves. They may look calm while carrying chronic anxiety. They may seem socially capable but feel intense fear around disapproval. They may have high empathy and very fragile boundaries. This is why being too nice is not simply about behavior. It is about perception, identity, memory, and self-protection all working together. There is also a cognitive side to this. Social psychologists have long studied how approval affects human behavior. We are deeply social creatures. Belonging matters. Rejection hurts. In fact, research in affective neuroscience suggests that social pain activates some of the same neural regions involved in physical pain, particularly areas like the anterior cingulate cortex. Your brain does not treat exclusion as something trivial, it treats it as a threat. So if a person grew up especially sensitive to signs of rejection, their mind may become organized around prevention. They learn to anticipate disappointment, monitor tone, and shape their behavior to reduce the chance of conflict. This can become a habit so automatic that they no longer experience it as a choice. It just feels like being a good person. But goodness and fear can look similar from the outside. That is part of what makes this psychology so hidden. Another layer of the problem is self-concept. Many overly nice people build their entire identity around being the reliable one. It becomes one of their core characteristics. They are the helper, the listener, the emotionally responsible one, the one who never asks for much, the one who can handle it. This identity often brings pride. It can make a person feel useful, moral, and special in a crowded social world. But when an identity is built around constant accommodation, any attempt to set limits can feel like a threat to the self, not just to relationships, but to who you are. This is why some people feel guilt when they say no, even when no is completely reasonable. They are not just declining a request, they are violating an internal role, and roles are powerful. Psychology has shown again and again that human behavior is shaped by the stories we tell about ourselves. If your self-image is, I am the easy one, I am the strong one, or I am the one people can count on, then rest becomes selfish, anger feels dangerous, and boundaries feel like betrayal. This is also why too nice people are often misunderstood. Others may assume they are naturally low maintenance, but many are not low maintenance at all. They are high suppression. There is a difference. A low maintenance person truly has fewer demands in that moment. A high suppression person has needs but has learned not to reveal them. That difference changes everything. It changes relationships, it changes conflict, it changes intimacy, it changes loneliness, because relationships do not become deep merely through giving. They become deep through mutuality, through being known, through allowing your inner experience to exist in the room, even when it is inconvenient. And that is precisely what compulsive niceness struggles to do. Now, there is an uncomfortable truth here. Being too nice can sometimes contain a hidden hope that is rarely spoken aloud. If I am good enough, generous enough, patient enough, intuitive enough, then people will eventually notice. They will reciprocate without me having to ask. They will love me in the way I have been loving them. This hope is very human. It is not manipulative in the cartoonish sense people often imagine. It is often innocent, even heartbreaking. It is the hope that if you give others the map to care, they will follow it back to you. But many people do not because they are evil, not because they consciously want to exploit you, but because unspoken needs often remain invisible. People get used to the version of you that is always available. They mistake your silence for ease. They confuse your tolerance with capacity. They assume you are okay because you have trained them to. This is one of the cruel ironies of excessive niceness. The better you become at hiding your limits, the less others can see them. And this can feed bitterness. You start doing emotional math. I showed up for them. I remembered their details. I adjusted. I forgave. I understood. So why does no one do that for me? Again, the answer is not always that no one cares. Sometimes the answer is that your behavior has made your suffering legible only to you. This is not your fault in a moral sense. It is a learned strategy, but it is a strategy with consequences. There is also a relationship between niceness and anxiety that deserves attention. Anxiety often creates a powerful need to control outcomes, especially social outcomes. But many people cannot control others directly, so they try to control interactions indirectly through over-accommodation. They become careful, agreeable, highly edited versions of themselves. They try to prevent awkwardness, prevent disappointment, prevent rejection, prevent anger. In that sense, niceness can become a form of social management. If everyone is okay, I can relax. If no one is upset, I can breathe. If I keep things smooth, maybe nothing bad will happen. But this creates a trap because life is full of tension, disappointment, and misunderstanding. You cannot eliminate all friction without eliminating much of yourself. And when your nervous system depends on universal approval, ordinary human conflict starts to feel catastrophic. This is why some very nice people experience intense stress from small interpersonal moments. A delayed reply, a short tone, a mildly disappointed expression, a hint of irritation. These signs may trigger old emotional memories, even if the current situation is harmless. The body reacts before the rational mind catches up. That is important to understand. Many niceness habits are not happening at the level of deliberate thinking, they are happening at the level of conditioning. Your body learned that tension is dangerous. Your mind learned that pleasing reduces tension, so your behavior became organized around compliance. Once you see that, a lot of things begin to make sense. Why you say yes too fast, why you replay conversations at night, why you feel shame after expressing a simple preference, why someone else's mood can dominate your inner world, why being good feels safer than being free. And if this is resonating uncomfortably, there is something worth saying very clearly. This does not mean your kindness is fake. It means your kindness may be carrying more fear than you realized. That nuance matters. Many people hear these ideas and swing too far in the other direction. They start thinking, so I should stop caring, stop helping, stop being considerate? But psychology is rarely that simple. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become congruent, to let your behavior reflect both compassion and truth. Real kindness includes you. That may sound obvious, but for someone with chronic people-pleasing habits, it can feel almost revolutionary, because they often treat themselves as the only person excluded from their own empathy. They understand everyone else's stress, they justify everyone else's limitations, they make room for everyone else's feelings, but when it comes to their own anger, fatigue, grief, or disappointment, they become harsh, dismissive, or ashamed. This split is often rooted in low self-worth, not always dramatic self-hatred, sometimes something quieter, a subtle belief that your role is to accommodate, not to burden, to support, not to require, to understand, not to be understood. That belief can shape an entire life. It influences romantic relationships, where two nice people may become overfunctioners, constantly managing the emotional climate and accepting crumbs in return. It affects friendships, where they become the unpaid therapist but struggle to ask for help. It shapes work, where they take on extra labor, avoid conflict, and then burn out. It even affects memory and self-perception, because when you are chronically focused outward, your own internal experience becomes blurred. You may not know what you want, You may not know what you feel until much later. You may only recognize your needs once they become resentment. That delayed awareness is a real psychological pattern. When people are socialized to monitor others more than themselves, their access to their own emotional signals can weaken. They are not emotionless, they are simply interrupted. And this brings us to a deeper question. Why is it so hard to stop? Why can a person fully understand this pattern and still repeat it? Because insight is not the same as safety. You can understand intellectually that boundaries are healthy. You can know that saying no is normal. You can agree that honesty improves relationships. But if your nervous system has linked self-assertion with danger, your body may still react as if boundaries threaten survival. That is why change often feels irrationally difficult. A simple sentence like, "I can't do that tonight," may trigger guilt, fear, and physical tension far beyond the situation itself. The current moment is small. The emotional memory behind it is not. This is where self-compassion becomes more than a comforting phrase. It becomes a method of repair. If compulsive niceness formed as a survival strategy, then shaming yourself for having it only deepens the wound. The psychology here requires curiosity, not "why am I so weak?" but "what did this behavior once protect me from?" That question changes the entire experience. It turns a flaw into a clue, a bad habit into a history, a frustrating behavior into a form of intelligence that may simply be outdated. And yes, many overly nice people are, in a certain sense, highly intelligent. Not because niceness itself is superior, but because these patterns often involve advanced social perception. You notice signals others miss, you track emotional details, you detect shifts in energy, tone, and social hierarchy. You learned people carefully because at some point it felt necessary. The problem is not that you learned this. The problem is when all of that intelligence gets used against yourself, when your empathy erases your boundaries, when your perception amplifies your anxiety, when your thoughtfulness becomes self-neglect, when your social skill turns into chronic self-editing. That is when a strength becomes a prison. So what does healing actually look like? Usually not dramatic transformation, usually not becoming blunt, detached, or fearless overnight. More often, it begins with tiny acts of self-recognition. Noticing the pause before your automatic yes. Noticing the tightness in your chest when someone is disappointed. Noticing how often you apologize for normal needs. Noticing how quickly you explain yourself. Noticing which relationships only function when you are overgiving. Awareness is not glamorous, but it is powerful. Because what remains unconscious feels like personality. What becomes conscious starts to become a choice. From there, boundaries are less about confrontation and more about accuracy. You are not becoming selfish, you are becoming honest. You are allowing your external behavior to match your internal reality a little more closely. And that honesty will teach you things. It will show you who respects your limits and who only enjoyed your lack of them. It will reveal which connections were mutual and which were built on your overfunctioning. It will bring discomfort because any shift in relational patterns does, but it will also bring relief, a very specific kind of relief. The relief of not performing goodness every minute, the relief of not carrying everyone, the relief of not translating your worth into usefulness, the relief of discovering that conflict does not always equal abandonment, the relief of realizing that some people can handle your no without collapsing. This is where self-esteem begins to change, not through affirmations alone, but through lived evidence. Every time you tell the truth and survive it, your nervous system updates. Every time you set a boundary and the world does not end, a new memory forms. Every time you let someone see a real feeling instead of a polished response, you create the possibility of actual intimacy. And this is worth emphasizing. Healthy relationships do not require you to be constantly pleasant. They require you to be present, present with your preferences, present with your limits, present with your emotions, present with your complexity. You are not here to be endlessly digestible for other people. That may be one of the hardest lessons for two nice people to accept, because many were rewarded for being simple, calm, and easy. But human beings are not easy, not really. We are full of contradiction. We have needs, moods, scars, hopes, habits, fears, and private memories. That is not a flaw in need of correction. That is the normal psychology of being alive. So if you have spent years being the nice one, maybe the real work is not becoming less kind. Maybe it is becoming kind in a way that includes your own inner world. Maybe it is learning that guilt is not always a sign that you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it is just a sign that you are doing something unfamiliar. Maybe it is understanding that the fear you feel in conflict is real, but not always accurate. Maybe it is recognizing that your old survival strategy was brilliant for the environment that shaped it and unnecessary for the life you are trying to build now. That is an important distinction. You do not need to hate the part of you that learned to please. You only need to stop letting it run your entire life. Because being too nice is not just a habit, it is often a biography written into behavior. And once you understand that, once you see the hidden psychology underneath the smile, the apology, the over explaining, the carefulness, the emotional labor, something shifts. You stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and you begin asking, "What happened to me and what do I need now?" That question is gentler, it is smarter, and strangely, it is the beginning of real change, not performative change, not change designed to impress people, but the quiet, difficult kind that rebuilds a relationship with the self. The kind where your kindness remains, but your disappearance does not. The kind where empathy remains, but resentment fades. The kind where your social warmth is no longer rooted in fear. The kind where love is no longer something you try to earn by becoming smaller. And perhaps that is the deepest explanation of all. A person who is too nice is often not trying to be admired. They are trying to be safe, chosen, and impossible to reject. Once you understand that, your behavior starts to make emotional sense. And when behavior makes sense, it can finally begin to change. Not through force, not through shame, but through understanding. And sometimes, understanding is where freedom starts.